Don't think about the 500 people. Don't think about the 500 people. What kind of cruel person puts me after Eric Spiekermann? You know? This like totally undermines my whole credibility as a designer. So, Eric's like a legend, so I've admired his work for a long time, and they have religions like the Church of Jesus Christ and Latter-day Eric Spiekermann, and they even named a form of data after one of his typefaces. So give that a couple minutes, you'll get it. So, at least some of my friends gave me some encouragement. So I wrote this book, Dan talked about it today, and it's kind of cool to have written a book like this, Responsive Design Workflow, because we all know that Ethan wrote the article, but then I have clients who come up to me and say, well, you wrote the book on responsive design, right? And I'm like, well, no, yeah, actually, I did that. So I'm actually not going to talk about responsive design today. Unfortunately for the people who thought I was going to do that, but I'll be talking about this, simplicity. And the way we look at simplicity is usually in terms of taking things away, kind of that subtractive sculpture idea. You have this block and you take things away that aren't necessary. But what if we turn that around and just don't add the unnecessary things in the first place? So in that sense, I'm doing what Eric doesn't like that those American people do. I'm telling you what I'm going to tell you. I will tell you when I tell you, and when I'm done, I'll probably tell you again what I just told you. That's just, the way we do it. Okay, so are you ready? Because some of you have beer, and you're going to need beer for this, okay? Now, you might recognize this site, this portion of a page. This is taken a couple years ago. It's from an airline, and you might recognize the airline because of the refined color palette and delicate typography. I'll explain to you what this says. I hope most of you could read it. It says here, after selecting, click on Add Selected Items to continue. And it says that in Dutch, okay? So I basically was trying to buy tickets. And this is the button that says Add Selected Items, okay? So I'm only looking up here because I can't read it on my screen. This says, in English, leave the booking as it was. So think about that for a second. This is Dutch, this is English. Why? I don't know. This button says, don't do that, in Dutch, all right? And this button says, no thank you. What the hell is going on here? Okay? So I'm thinking, wait a minute, I need to add the selected items, but I have to add them to continue, but I don't have selected items, so I want to leave the booking as it was, but don't do that, I think. No thank you, maybe? I don't know. Don't do it. What the fuck? Okay. I have always wanted to use those flames. So, the biggest problem with this is every goal we have is always the same goal, basically. There's like a goal template, if you will, the universal goal. A to B, right? Everything you want to do. I want a beer, I go get a beer. A, B. What we do, for some odd reason as web people, is we tend to make Rube Goldberg machines. Anyone know what a Rube Goldberg machine is? I can't see you. Yeah, quite a few. It's like this thing right here. So taking a sip of soup, which kind of activates this spoon that throws up a piece of bread, the parrot eats it, some kind of like fresh ground pepper shit falls into a bucket, and then a rocket gets shot off and then saws off this little piece of string, and then that like wipes the guy's mouth one time. So this is how we make websites, really, isn't it? So it's basically a Rube Goldberg thing is accomplishing by complex means, weird definition, what seemingly could be done simply, okay? So this is like A to B. We'll use Sass, use Bootstrap, add some frameworks, run around the block. So we have a Unicode character that describes this kind of UX, the pile of poo. This is very, very useful. I encourage you to use the pile of poo in your own work. Between A and B, there are lots of things that can kind of keep us from getting from A to B. And usually they're having to do with processes, conceptually, but also in our interactions. So processes within organizations as well. The UI itself has some problems, usually, and the technical implementation, okay? But the interesting thing about these problems, hold on. I've wanted to do this all day. What's up? All right, that's it. These are design decisions. So whenever anything is kind of funky in your website, someone decided to put that there, okay? So let's look at some of these. We'll look at problems and process, and we'll look at the other things, and I'll tell you what I told you. This thing, you've probably seen it a lot. I know a lot of other speakers have shown it before. This page has to be ideally opened on your laptop or desktop browser, okay? You go to that, you get a QR code which will take you to the page that you're supposed to be at on the mobile device that you're already on when you see this thing, which makes no sense whatsoever. That qualifies as a UI craplet. The funny thing about this is it says the page has to be ideally opened, as opposed to ideally the page should be opened this way. You have to ideally open it, so I don't know what that means. This kind of thing. You know, choose which way you know, are you a manager or are you on a desktop? Are you on a mobile? Crazy stuff, okay? Now this is the website of the town where I live. It's not the website for My Little Pony, even though it does kind of look like that. But they did one thing right. They've got a carousel right up there, okay? Which is, you know, we want to get every single department on the homepage. This is a problem because what the hell, you know? You can't really find what you're looking for, I suppose. So it could be simpler. Here's another one. I would almost say competing, but they don't compete. This is another municipality that probably falls in the Matt Marquis, you know, 4 megabyte picture of a salad category. But really, there's a search box, and there's pretty much just the subjects that people actually search for 80% of the time. So there's like a good percentage chance that you're going to get the information you want just by clicking on this thing here. And they still have all the other stuff for all the stakeholders that want to put their shit in the homepage, hidden behind a menu, you know, which is acceptable. Just hide it from us, I guess, if you don't want to, if you don't want to show it. So this is Amsterdam Schiphol Airport, which is usually where I fly out of, and I needed to park my car on a recent trip to London, or before I went to London. So I came to this page, and this is about parking, and it asks you in the middle here, are you going on vacation? If so, are you going shorter than 2 days, you know, or longer than 2 days, or is it a business vacation? I just want to park my car, okay? Is there an easier way to do this? So before I know what those things actually mean, I have to click on them and then read everything they talk about them, okay? So what about this? Different types of parking. Smart parking, park and travel, holiday valet parking, business parking, valet parking, excellence parking, short stop parking, visitors parking, excellence parking, Privium parking, my reservation, and a lot of frequently asked questions. So this is kind of weird. I have no idea what those things are. I will know once I click on them and read them. So it's kind of like, remember mystery meat navigation, where you just had these cryptic images and you kind of had to roll a mouse over them, and then something would, like a card would flip around, and you'd see, oh, it's about us, you know, that kind of thing. Well, this is just like that, just with a lot of text. And you know what's funny? all of these different types of parking are exactly the same parking lot. There's no difference whatsoever. So I don't get it. The rest of the process is great, which leads me to think they've got this system that handles the commerce part of it, and then some idiot did the front end. Okay, unless you're here, I love it. Credit card, you know, it was all pretty easy, pretty painless. So this is pretty good. To get here, I took the train. And you might not be able to read this. I went through, I looked at what time do I want to leave, what date do I want to leave. I had to pick the time. You know, everything got set up. And then it said, we're checking to see if tickets are still available. What I would think, you know, I took all this time to figure out what time. Just show me times that are available, right? That seems logical to many of us. So these are kind of process problems, interaction problems, things that keep you from getting from A to B. And I'm sure you could come up with a bunch more. There are other things that we do in our UIs that kind of keep us from getting from A to B. Things that are confusing, that you're like, why is this there? This is going to take longer. Little date pickers. We've got, you could choose the day, you could choose the month and the year together. They've got a little date picker just in case you like little JavaScript widgets instead of these two fields that we've already provided for you. And there's a time. And the time has nothing to do with anything because it doesn't matter what time because the price is just the same if you come in at 2 o'clock or at midnight. So why is it there? Because there's this little widget in this little framework or product that someone had, and it's already got this kind of thing, and all they do is implement it. There's no thinking in terms of what do we need to do to get from A to B. There's thinking in terms of we have this technology which might help us implement this thing, and no one's really concerned with the user experience here. So this is what you end up doing, getting the same price. Once you get past that initial hill, then you're okay. So there's a lot more examples. We won't get into all that today. So tech. This is for the developers. You might not think that there's a lot of stuff that developers do that get in between A and B, but there is quite a bit. Like this thing. This is like the worst thing that you can have if you just paid a lot of money to take a train or a plane or whatever it is. This was like an overlay, like one of those modal dialogue things. Please wait while we process. Your request is being processed. This can take up to 40 seconds. Caution. Are you ready? Do not open a new browser window or a new browser window tab on highspeed.nl during or immediately after payment. Do not use the browser buttons back, home, and refresh. And do not close the browser during the process. I was like sweating. Like, I had Chris's rock and roll juice flowing down, you know? So this was really, really nerve-wracking. And why? Because someone decided, you know, we're not just going to send something to the server normally when you press a button. We're just going to do some weird kind of asynchronous thing. So a lot of times we worry about browsers as developers, but we complain about things like IE and whatever browsers you have right now on mobile devices. But not being able to do something in a particular browser is not a browser problem, it's a design problem. Okay? Tweet that. Drop the bass. So here's God, I'd love a beer, you know, right now. But I'll wait. I see all of you have them. Transfer lots of money. I give this example a lot. This was my bank, which was, you know, they were bragging about how accessible they were, their website. And I went to transfer a certain amount of money, and they had this button. And I thought, well, I'll, you know, send that money. But it wasn't a button, actually. It was a link, okay? And it was made to look like a button, and it links to nowhere, actually, and it's JavaScript and click dependent, and it's really stupid. And the reason it's stupid is because I'm used to typing and then clicking on forms. Anyone do that? Do you not use the mouse to send a form? You just, like, press enter? Anyone? Yeah, like everyone. Okay, good. Whew. Thanks. So I did that, and nothing happened. So I was like, what? You know, and of course, since I'm like half nerd, I opened the DevTools, and I was like, what's going on here? And what happened was the script was written in such a way, and I'm not even sure how you can write a script in this way, that it would take a click, but it wouldn't take an enter. So I'm sure you JavaScript people would know how that's possible, but you know, I would think really stupid mistake. So what happened was, because I pressed enter, somehow that negated the whole click thing. So even clicking after that, like not clicking thing, just ruined it, and it wouldn't send the money, I think, because I'm not sure. So I'm like, refresh the page, because it's, you know, this is a lot of money. Refresh, all my stuff's gone. Do I have to fill it in again? Will I be sending it twice? What's going on here? So that's crazy. So let's take a look at how they managed to complicate things so effectively. Number one, they made a link. Number two, they styled it to look like a button. Number three, they added JavaScript to make it act like a button. And then they reduced complexity by not testing. So let's look at how they could have done it. They could have just used a button, okay? And they could have, you know, done that. Hold on, they could have styled it. Thank you. So another example is this, a breakpoint. So a lot of you know CSS, so you'll be able to understand what's going on here. We basically have two columns. The article is on the left. It's got 60% width. It's floated to the left. We've got this aside. It's floated to the right. So it's kind of like this two-column thing, like an article with a sidebar type situation. And then we're saying, okay, when it's under 900 pixels, let's put the width to 100% on both those things and don't float them so that, you know, they're just right underneath each other. Are you serious? You know, this is stuff that people actually do, and it deserves our Unicode pile of poo, because obviously you styled article and aside as columns, and then you just used a media query to undo what you just did, when you could have just styled it from, you know, the min width, 900 pixels in that case. And it sounds like a stupid example if this is pretty normal for you to do it this way. I've seen a lot of websites, and you probably have as well, where they do this kind of thing. And this is, you know, it's all responsive design, right? So again, we've got these processes, conceptual, the UI, technical implementations. These are problems between A and B. So let's talk about what simple is for a minute. There's a difference between simple and simple looking, as we all know. So one example is like the iPhone, the iPad. You know, we got the one little button. It seems elegant. We've got one button. The thing is, when you reduce something to one button, suddenly that button has a lot of responsibilities, right? You have to know that sometimes you can double-click that button. You know, it took me a while to figure out when the first iOS came out. Well, you know, when we first could multitask, I guess, with iOS. How do I close stuff? You know, it took me a while. Yeah, you have to double press that thing, and then this little thing pops up, and you can press all the X's and close it. This is one that Brad Frost sent me. This little area right here, see that? That's pretty obviously the area where you can paste a phone number that you copied from somewhere else. It's obvious because, you know, there's like empty space right there. So really clear. And not to knock iOS, which sucks. No, I'm kidding. I'm not allowed to say that, am I? Another thing is like calculators. How many people have, you know, you're on a calculator and you press clear, but you don't press clear once. Who presses clear like, you know, 25 times? Exactly. You know, that's the thing. There's even a what is that, UX exchange or something, question about this. Yeah. What makes them trust the button less than the other buttons? Right? Why do you trust the one? I trust the one. I don't trust clear. You know, it's not a trustworthy button for some reason. Is there some sort of feedback mechanism that's missing? The theory is that there's a difference between, on the old calculators, between clearing just one portion of the thing you typed in and clearing the whole thing. Okay? And now that we have all different new types of calculators, there's some kind of ambiguity about what that exactly is going to do and if you really cleared everything or not. So, I mean, we can think of many, many examples where this kind of thing comes into our websites when we're not sure, or web applications, we're not sure if something's happening the way it's supposed to be happening. I'm not sure if the money that I tried to send actually got sent, right? That type of thing can be very dangerous, especially if we're talking about people like, I guess, normal, non-nerd people. I always say my mom. You know, I think everyone uses their mom as an example. But, you know, any woman that it takes me 2 hours to explain to her on the phone across, you know, the ocean how to install Skype, you know, these are not people that you want to mess up from going from A to B, okay? Another thing is the hamburger icon, which we've heard about, which is weird. Did you find the name hamburger to be like the strangest thing? Who came up with that? So if you have like one stripe, is that a hot dog icon? I don't know. So this turns out, as Luke Wroblewski's talked about many times, that this is not really clear to a lot of people. They don't know what it is. And we think because everybody uses it, that everyone knows what it is. But use doesn't imply, you know, some kind of knowledge of this thing. This is a lot more clear, right? The word menu. And there are all these other things, like you should have some kind of visual affordance around these things so that you know that you can tap it. All right? So these are things we have to think about as well. And we saw the example in one of the talks, time.com, with like 5 different ways of explaining what this thing is. If you need 5 ways of explaining what something is, maybe someone made the wrong choice, right? On the other hand, simple doesn't mean stupid. Complex doesn't mean smart either. So we kind of get used to interfaces that other people can't get used to because it's, we're nerdy that way, and we understand a lot of things that other people don't. At the same time, we don't need to Fisher-Price our designs. We don't need to have, turn everything into children's book type illustrations, okay? We also don't need to make less of a product. So I've talked about products like Basecamp, which I totally respect the people at the former 37 Signals, and they make great stuff. I personally just can't work with that kind of software because it seems visually simple to me. But the conversation I end up having with clients is basically they're asking me, okay, how do I find that thing in Basecamp? So that's something that we need to think about as well. Just because it looks simple doesn't mean it is simple. And we also don't need to make something look simpler than it needs to be. People are pretty intelligent, but we just have to avoid getting in our own way. Okay. So how does complexity happen? Sometimes by adding something simple, and most of the time it's by starting with too much. And the reason we start with too much is because we have all these different abstraction layers that we add to things. We've got frameworks, CMSs already, so we make technological decisions before we make content decisions. We make technological decisions before we make design decisions. And this is not really the way it should be. So if you see technology as the vehicle to get from A to B, you have to know what A is, you have to know what B is, and figure out the way you're going to get there, and then choose the technology that's going to help you do that. And that's something we tend not to do. Oftentimes it's because of our clients, and oftentimes it's also because we are so in love with our little pet technologies. You know, when I first started using Sass, I hated Sass. I never tried it, I just hated it, you know. And then I started using it, I'm like, Sass, you know. And everyone's like, Sass, and they're like, welcome to our side, you know. And I saw most of you use Sass, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's great, but we kind of try to figure out how we're going to interject these technologies into the things we're doing because we think they're so cool. And we have to ask ourselves, they're cool, but are they appropriate? Designer Neville Brody once said, there's no such thing as bad design, there's only inappropriate design. And that's true. In that sense, you can argue that Comic Sans is actually a There's nothing wrong with it inherently. It's just the way it's used that's the problem. Okay. John Maeda, in his book, The Laws of Simplicity, says that the simplest way to achieve simplicity is through thoughtful reduction. But I think, while I respect that, and I love John Maeda's work, if you don't add it, you don't have to take it away. Okay? So, the other simplest way to achieve simplicity is by not complicating things in the first place. And that's hard to do. So how do we do that in web projects? I talked about it in my book. I've seen other people talking about it today and yesterday. It's this thing, the site you've seen 100 million times lately, the very first web page. Really, it doesn't do anything that can break itself. So it's still around. It still works, even with the code that was made back then. You know, it's still HTML, even though it looks slightly different. There's just nothing added to break it. And so that's the way we have to think. It's also the key to device agnostic design, is to think in terms of this base that you build upon, so that your things will not break in any different browsers. You'll see that things will just work almost everywhere. They don't have to work perfectly, because that's the web. It just flows, right, like water. So this concept of zero-based budgeting, if you've worked with large organizations or government organizations like I have, you'll probably be familiar with this idea. Most of the time, you have this budget. People work toward the end of the year. You ever notice, the roads, there's a lot of construction toward the end of the year, so they could use up the budget so they could justify that they get the same amount of budget next year. Zero-based budgeting is different because it doesn't look at the past. The budget history is ignored. It only looks at what do we need right now. What's the acute need? And what you had in the past, that doesn't matter. Okay? So my consultancy, I call Zero Interface. It's this idea that I've talked about for many years. The Zero Interface is basically the same thing as zero-based budgeting. We start from the ground up, zero, and then design baggage is ignored. Okay, so it's just like you think about something and it's done. I want to order that, I want to transfer that money, boom, it's done. That's utopian, it doesn't exist. But every single thing in between that A and the B is possibly one step too many. So what's design baggage? What I mean by that is the stuff that the clients, designers, and developers all add to the project without thinking about or testing against the goal of A to B. Your pet frameworks, the client, all the stakeholders who want their thing on the homepage, has nothing to do with A to B for the customer. It's just something that the organization or the people building the site want to put into this product. Okay? So you kind of wonder, and you've probably had this in your projects, who are we making this for? Is it for the customer, or is it just to please all these stakeholders, or is it just to please us, as prima donna designers as we are? Examples of client baggage would be, for example, the refusal to understand the idea of sunk costs. We spent 100,000 euros on this CMS, so we are going to use the CMS. Doesn't matter if it causes problems, that it will cost us $500,000. We paid for it, we don't want to lose it. Okay? Makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Competitor patterns. Our competitor is doing that, so we need to do it too. So obviously no one has explained anything to these people about competitive advantage, but that's just the way it goes. And carousels. Designer and developers, we have our baggage as well. Trends, flat design, 3D beveled design. Remember that one? Blinking. If you're as old as I am, you remember blinking. Pattern libraries. Yeah, we'll just throw it, Bootstrap. Frameworks. Would Bootstrap qualify as a framework? Probably. I don't know. There are a lot of frameworks. Some of them are good. I'm not saying frameworks and pattern libraries are bad. They can be the design baggage if you just decide at the very beginning, we're going to use this thing because we think it's good, and it might not be useful for the website. And conventional wisdom. We should do things this way. we should do things that way. Button dash dash underscore or underscore large. I'm kidding, Jonathan. So the problem with baggage is that it's all focused on existing solutions. But their existing solutions, if they're existing solutions, they're solving something else. They're not solving your problem necessarily. Someone came up with these things to solve a problem, and most likely it wasn't your specific problem. Clients are always focusing on solutions. I had this one example where I was doing a site, and there was a slogan that I didn't know there was a slogan, and apparently there was one, and they wanted it in the header, and it had to be bigger, and then it had to be even more big, and then it had to be blue, then it had to be a different blue, and then another blue, and then I thought, because I do web-based mockups, I'm going to implement a JavaScript color picker right next to the slogan, and I said, go to the mockup, click on that thing, choose the color you like, a little code will pop up, copy that, paste it into an email, send it back to me, have a nice day. And it worked fantastically, which is, by the way, that's like already a use case for doing web-based mockups as opposed to Photoshop comps. Bless you. Stop focusing on solutions and start focusing on problems. This is something that it's like non-intuitive. We always want to focus on solutions, but we don't think enough about the problem that we're having, which would help us to choose a solution. So we've probably all had the situation where clients are trying to figure out the solution to the problem. Make the logo bigger, obviously might not solve the problem most effectively. It's a solution to a problem. What is the problem? You don't feel there's enough attention going to the logo. Well, we could fix that in like 100 different ways. And we need to figure out what the best way is for this particular situation. Making something bigger isn't always going to solve the problem. Throwing a certain framework at a project is not always going to solve your problem. It might give you one date field too many. It might require you to use links instead of buttons. So how can we achieve this simplicity? We have to stop using our bag of tricks. Stop using the things you always use. This is where you become creative, is when you use zero-based thinking as a thinking exercise. What if we were able to start off completely with a clean slate, You can't do that in your projects, but you can do that as a thinking exercise. What would we do? How would we approach it if we could start over completely? And just that thinking exercise is one of those little, art director trick things that we used to do in advertising to come up with something totally different and a little bit more creative than we would have come up with if we just kind of go down the beaten path. I'll give you 3 ways that you can start working more simply. And one is to just start with nothing. So just think of that clean slate. If you have the luxury of starting a project with nothing, just start with nothing and then add content and start sculpting. If you're a designer, you can do things that way. Think about that every single thing you add has to go through this like torture chamber, if you will. I don't know if you know about US Navy SEAL training, but they have this thing, I think it's the 3rd week of their training called Hell Week, and I think they sleep like about 4 hours within a 4 or 5 day period, and it's very, very tough. And they're carrying this big log here, this huge thing, and that's kind of their punishment. If they drop it, they have to do it again and again and again until they can do it for the amount of time specified. So every single thing you add, test it against, is it helping me get from A to B? And you might think it'll give you a boring design if you do that, or a boring solution. It'll probably give you a simpler solution that you can enhance and make better somehow later on. Improve the experience and spend your time doing that as opposed to doing all this stuff that's not necessary. And remember that every single thing you add is pretty much too much by default. And then step 3 is just stop. Know when to stop. And then refine if necessary. And this is really hard because we want to add that one more thing. But try to make like the very minimal interface that you can make, even without any kind of style, without any kind of design, and see if it works. See if people can get from A to B. Start user testing on something that's not done yet, just to see if it works already. okay? So the zero interface is think, done. A to B. Really easy if you can get there. And it's not easy to do. I'm talking about it like it's easy, but it's very hard. It's a hard exercise. One of the good examples there are two pretty good examples I can think of that kind of come close to the zero interface idea. And one is Amazon's one-click. So anyone used one-click before? Yeah? Okay, quite a few, not everybody. It's kind of a scary thing. And when you think about solutions that allow you to get from A to B almost as quick as you can think about it, those solutions tend to be pretty scary in and of themselves. Like the one-click thing, I was wondering when I was kind of preparing this talk, is it really one click? You probably get like this separate thing that says, are you sure you want to buy this or that? But those of you who have used it before know that's not the case, right? So you get the book, really. So you got to be aware of too easy, okay? And Google Now is another example. So I open my phone, I'm going to search for something on Google, and then I see these cards that are like, here's your flight, this is the weather in Austin, and I'm like, what? How does it know that? And I thought Google Now probably searches my mail. Creepy stuff. So I get that like A to B thing at the cost of all my privacy. So you have to think about that as well. Don't get creepy though. Allow people to say, I want this. I want you to read my mails and give me this kind of thing. Or don't be too easy. I want to be able to stop the Amazon one-click process before I do something like this. I apparently bought Getting Things Done by David Allen just by clicking once, and okay, got it. That's it. So B.J. Fogg, who talks a lot about behavioral models, he's got behaviormodel.org, which is really good. I encourage you to take a look at that if you're into design and how you can help users to get exactly from A to B the way that they need to. Focus on simplicity and you increase ability. So it enables all of your customers, all of your user base to be able to do the things that they want to do. And that's very, very helpful. So if you hear this, it sounds a lot like progressive enhancement, and that's because that's what it is. You start at a base and you keep enhancing and enhancing, and you can make the most dramatic experience that you want, but you can make sure in this way that it works for most people equally well. Okay? So people are really reluctant to get rid of their design baggage, and Grace Potter has said that humans are allergic to change, and they always say, we've always done it this way. So I encourage you to just kind of turn that on its head, start thinking from the ground up, don't think from technology, and sometimes the best results happen when you just turn things around. Okay? So thank you.